about working on transmedia work that has an online component is that, unlike film and television that might get scheduled and screened and then really after the DVD release often just sort of really disappears other than in educational use, you find with the online environment that your work is always accessible for the duration, usually of the license period, that you've got it up on any particular server. Now you have a choice of whether you're going to assign that license to an external server, and you know, the number of projects I've done with the ABC, those projects have actually stayed up on the ABC server well past their original license date. They don't have any particular use by date unless you, for documentary, unless you've got something that's so topical, which really is probably news and current affairs and not documentary. So it does actually extend the life significantly, having a work online, provided that you've got the resources to keep the server access. If it's not an external server and you're doing it internally, then that's just really up to you as to how long you keep renewing. But look, it's not a big expense. So the real issue is not one of longevity, but is of how are you going to renew and keep engaged with your audience that they would even want to come back and discover what you've got online. And that is high maintenance. To really make, you know, a website properly active and engage with people requires a lot of maintenance and going back in and engaging, and you can do that in a variety of ways. If it's interactive, you're often inviting content from your audience base. You can often have that by way of a forum or discussion, so you need to seed that with new ideas and put out calls to action. Or it could be a gallery, in which case you're inviting people to upload their videos or their photographs and so on. And again, you've got to keep putting out the prompts. And we found that one of the best ways to do this is to actually engage with social media marketing and to actually use tools like YouTube and Facebook and Vimeo in conjunction with our built website, and to, you know, really be cross-referencing and cross-promoting content and in discussion and dialogue and calls to action using social media. There are a number of challenges in this area, because it really, producing in cross-platform or transmedia is profoundly different to on a basic level for websites as opposed to linear film and television. So for instance, if you're scheduling, you're not working in a linear progression of pre-production, production, post-production, delivery. You're actually working in a much more iterative cycle that involves a number of stages which are usually marked by milestones, and that you're working often in, it can be an environment where you can't assume that the collaborative models that worked for film and TV are going to be the same models for those digital natives who are working as developers and designers, because in fact you will find that many of digital natives are actually working in service company models, which are really about a client relationship. So it's not so much about the creative collaboration as where the writer, director and producer will have involvement in every stage and asking that question, what if, you know, right up to the end of the production, you know, in the edit room, for instance. You can't do that on the online environment because of the expense involved and the way that all the elements have to come together with scheduling. It's absolutely incumbent on you to have everything worked out almost to completion at the beginning before you embark, which is why it's so important to develop everything through user experience and wireframes and scoping documents, so that you don't have many changes at the other end, because a single tweak at the other end could mean, well, A, it's probably impossible to achieve, but it could mean fundamentally changing programming that was done right at the beginning and has led to a whole series of other aspects of the navigational architecture and the structure. So I don't see it as flexible. It's often incredibly expensive, because again, people working in service companies in the digital media environment can be earning anywhere from $150 to $300 an hour for their work, and that's just way off the scale compared to what people in film and often in television tend to work at. So there's very different sets of expectations that can happen there. One of the areas that I'm most interested in is what happens to the notion of authorship and creativity in this environment. And by that I mean, who is the author? Is it the developer? Is it the designer and the programmer who are realising the ideas, or is it the writer-director? Can it be the writer-director if the writer-director is not the developer and is shut out of the process of actually building the site and is really a client who's being reported back to, and doesn't have sufficient knowledge about the capability and capacity of the tools, the digital IT tools at their disposal? And what happens to ideas of creativity when in fact the whole process has to go through a content management system that is usually controlled by the developers, where every single tweak, every idea, every suggestion, every single aspect of the script has to really go into a grid where it becomes a task that needs to be enacted by a designer or a developer. And it is ticketed usually, and you have to, if you're making changes, you have to use, it's quite a, I mean, they're good management systems, but it is a management system, but you can find that management system starts to now dictate the boundaries of the project and what isn't possible. So these are the kind of questions that are raised for me really in this area of transmedia and cross-platform. And because they're unresolved, it does lead to a lot of insecurity for traditional film and television makers, writers, producers, directors who are used to a much more continuous engagement, I suppose, with the delivery of their creative work from beginning to end. My advice to producers who haven't yet stepped into this world is really not to approach it with fear and loathing and think that this is, you know, another whole area that's going to take years and years and years to grapple with and just put it in the too hard basket all the time. But actually start to look at the kind of work that is online or is presented across platforms that they find interesting. And start to look at, well, who's producing that? Who are the developers? Who are the designers and so on working on that work? And finding actually there is already here in Australia, because we have been world leaders, there is a fabulous, fabulous pool of digital media practitioners, developers, designers, programmers here. And finding the kind of people that they might be able to team up with. Because what this is about is not having to learn the tools as so much as how to engage the people who understand those tools and to apply them to ideas. Because that's what producers do ultimately. We fall in love with ideas and we know that those ideas should have a place within a particular market or for particular audiences, and we find the people to help us deliver those ideas. Same deal for cross-platform and transmedia.